What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Celtics Daily with me, Mike Zakarian. And yes, we are still in black because we are still in mourning. The NBA playoffs continue, but the Celtics season does not, as their title defense came up short against the Knicks. And we're now starting to get into some of the breadcrumbs of the offseason. We're hearing from some of the Celtics leadership about what the next steps could be. I mean, in true Celtics and Brad Stevens fashion, we're not learning too much, but we're starting to get an idea of what the offseason is going to look like. And we got some injury updates. But first and foremost, Al Horford, Big Al, the big constant of the Celtics front line for the last few years, both in the first iteration of this Celtics team and then the most recent championship run. Al now is a free agent and also old, and we're starting to get to the point where, like, is Al going to come back for one more year, give it one more run? Is he going to sign somewhere else to ring chase, or is he just going to call it a career? I think heading into the playoffs, the assumption was that Al Horford was going to be back. If you remember in March Madness, right, because he's a Florida Gator alum, when Florida was making their tournament run, Al was at the Final Four and even said something to the media while he was down there that he's got another year or two in him. However, post this playoff run, and now with this Tatum injury and the Celtics' future looking very different than what it was going to look like, say, 6 to 8 weeks ago, Al even came out and said maybe it's a little too soon to discuss what the future looks like. Now, that is a responsible thing to do. You shouldn't be making rash decisions the second something ends. However, this is the first indication or inclination that Al may be not playing basketball anymore, either for the Boston Celtics or just in general. And Al's had a storied career. I think he'll be a Hall of Famer, especially when you think about how the the Hall of Fame, includes both NBA and collegiate experience. We know Al won his titles with Florida. He's also now an NBA champion because of the Boston Celtics and has had a long and storied career. So it would be, totally fine for him to call it quits. And I think Al, don't want to speak for him because I've never met the guy, but would imagine he thought next year would be another deep sort of playoff run. And now with Tatum, which we got a little bit more news about Tatum, which we'll talk about in a second, being done for the year and this roster looking a little bit different because of financial considerations, this could be the end of Al Horford. Maybe one of the most, or not maybe, the most beloved Celtic in recent history since the Paul Pierce KG era. So whatever Al decides to do, listen, shout out Al. He got the chip, got the ring. Congrats on a run. Would love to have you back, but who knows? I bet we even see Al in the coaching. I was going to say the coaching booth. It's not really a booth, but I could see him coaching here at some point. But so we'll have to wait and see. I'm sure we'll hear about Al as we get closer to the NBA draft. I think that's when we're going to start to see a lot of these decisions being made. And speaking of that, Brad Stevens even mentioned that yesterday, that in his press conference, like an exit interview almost, was talking about the season, but also he was like, I don't want to talk too much about the Knicks, but I also don't want to talk too much about the future. It was a lot of like wishy-washy without actually saying anything. But one of the things he did mention was Jason Tatum. And I know there's been some reporting around this, but saying that how fortunate as you can be when you suffer a catastrophic injury, for it to happen in New York. And the part of the reason why that was a good thing for all of them is, I forget the doctor's name I'm going to find it right here. Dr. O'Malley is the one who also did this surgery on Kevin Durant when he got dinged up way back when he was on the Golden State Warriors. Happened to be just like 15 minutes away from where the injury happened at Madison Square Garden. So the second the MRI was over, they were able to get right in there, get the surgery and the procedure done. And now that's supposed to kickstart his recovery process a little bit faster than, say, some of these other situations where these injuries have happened, like most recently with Damian Lillard and the Milwaukee Bucks. So he was a little bit positive on that. However, he did speak about the Knicks series a little bit, and I appreciated some of his candidness because he said that the Celtics blew those first two games. And now anybody that watched those first two games in that playoff series against the Knicks, we all saw that. We saw that they blew it, but very rarely do they speak honestly and openly in those moments. They kind of find different ways to talk about it. But he did. He just said that they came out and blew those games, and then it made the road a lot harder because when you drop two, now you get to win 4 of the next 5, right? And that, obviously, Boston didn't do that, and you just don't have a lot of room for error when that happens. Brad also said that they were going to be, talking with the key stakeholders of the Boston Celtics, obviously new ownership and Bill Chisholm, and as they get closer to the NBA draft, I think we'll have a clearer picture of what the immediate future, anyways, is going to look like for the Celtics. Again, tons of rumblings about different players who are going to be coming and going. Celtics trying different ways to get under this second apron and under the cap. I don't know if it's going to be like drastic moves or small moves, but luckily it's somebody like Brad who, Brad has been through so many different iterations of the Celtics, right? When he came over here from Butler, this Celtics team was supposed to be in like full rebuild tank mode, right? And then they kind of immediately jumped up with, Tatum and Brown and then the Isaiah Thomas runs, and he's kind of seen a bunch of different stuff. He's seen how Danny Ainge has handled things, and I'm curious, like, what kind of mentality he's going to take. This is the first real, like, shaky thing that's happened, right? I mean, obviously, he was coaching when the Gordon Hayward injury happened, but since moving into this president of basketball operations, first kind of, like, big decision point he's going to make. Before, it was just kind of massaging around the edges to try to set this Tatum and Brown team up to go win a title. The biggest hiccups they had were, like, how they blew the 3-0, how they went down 3-0 to the Miami Heat a couple of years ago, right? When they lost the finals against the Warriors, all that stuff. But this is like real algebra. You got to start to figure out how to make the money work and how to like put a product out there that you can be proud of. And are you going to tank for a year and then come back when Tatum's back, or how are you going to handle it? So it'll be interesting to see how Brad attacks this offseason, and it'll be our first test or our first taste, I guess, of new ownership and how they're going to approach this. Do they immediately want to cut costs after spending $6.5 billion to buy the team, or are they willing to, like, hey, give a nod to the fans, like, we're willing to pay this money to stay relevant? So we'll see. The other update we got was on the Zanger, Porzingis, Kristaps Porzingis. Brad talked about it a little bit. And he described it as a post-bacterial infection, whatever. Let me see if I can find it here. He came out, Steven said, our expectation is that it'll probably be the next couple of weeks will do him good to be off. He said he's going to play for Latvia. I think that's a good thing. I think it's good to be playing in Eurobasket, and I'm sure it will be cleared up by then. Steven said the illness was described as a post-viral syndrome, which is just lingering effects after a long illness. Now, what's kind of surprising about that is he did come back towards the end of the regular season and looked okay. He had some moments in the Orlando Magic series where he, looked all right, but clearly just didn't have it for the Knicks. I hope that's what it is, if it's just lingering effects and then having like 2 straight weeks off, because when we're in the playoffs, right, it's almost every other day. Occasionally you have 2 days off, but essentially it's every other day. And if that really is what it was, where he wasn't getting enough rest to be good to go, then the couple of weeks, if we see him in Eurobasket and he's popping off, that's great. Because 1, we care about the dude's health. You want the dude to be healthy. 2, selfishly, if he's not going to be a Celtic, I want his trade value to be high as hell. And if he is going to be a Celtic, I want him to be healthy and ready to go. So that was some pretty good news on Kristaps Porzingis. Still just like a bizarre scenario. Like, again, a perfect storm of dog crap that happened to Boston between Jaylen Brown's injury, which we'll talk about here in a second, Porzingis, Drew Holiday, Tatum. Title defenses are hard. And let's talk about Jaylen Brown, because Brad Stevens kind of pushed back on some of the reporting that was done by ESPN and Ramona Shelburne, just saying that they don't really know about where JB stands with this injury stuff. I think they're still going to take some time. He came out and said, too, I think for everything Jaylen has said to me and said here, I think that what I just said is probably the outlook. What was reported this weekend, that's been something that he's had for a while, and it's been stable. So I guess like the partially torn meniscus, they've known about this whole time. So even though it was alluded that JB had a bone bruise, again, I don't understand how injury reporting happens. Like, I don't know. Like, sometimes you have to tell the truth. Sometimes you don't. I don't know why you can just say different stuff, but he sounded hopeful that JB is not going to need an operation, which I think is important. You don't want to be going under the knife, because anything, you can just have complications from it. Sometimes the recovery takes a little bit longer than anticipated. So hopefully just some rest from JB and he will be good to go. But man, feels bleak for the Beantown boys, for the Celtics. It's been a tough week, especially me specifically being in New York and seeing everybody celebrate aggressively and throw trash at Pacers fans. A lot of orange and blue, a lot of Spike Lee and Tracy Morgan. And for Celtics fans, we just have off season. And we don't even have like an exciting draft pick to get jacked up about. I think we're going to be picked 28. But hopefully, as we get closer to the draft, we'll get a better feel for how the Celtics are going to approach the offseason. One other last wrinkle is, you can Google potential free agents this upcoming season, but it's not a lot. Most of the free agents still have like a player option. They're like restricted free agents. So I don't think there's going to be a lot of movement in that way this offseason. I don't think we're going to see a lot of players swapping teams unless it's through the trade. Now, part of that is because of like the new collective bargaining agreement and the financial situation a lot of these teams are in. But I actually think there's going to be way more speculation about people moving and less actual people moving. And the Celtics, if they're moving around, it's probably moving people out, not necessarily in. So the offseason is going to be interesting and not in like the fun celebratory way. It's just going to be like, what do we have left? So that's going to do it for me in today's Celtics Daily episode. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Do me a favor, hit the subscribe before you duck on out of here and leave a comment. Who are you hoping that the Celtics target this offseason?